It's time for another episode of Let's Talk Business, featuring interviews with South Carolina business executives, community leaders, and government dignitaries. Let's Talk Business is a truly one-of-a-kind business-to-business talk show. And now, here's your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher, Rick Jenkins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. I'm your host, Rick Jenkins, and I am so glad that you're here on episode number 16. Whether you are checking us out on our YouTube channel or maybe you have downloaded the podcast on Apple or Spotify or Google, regardless of how you are accessing the content today, I am glad that you are. I have what I'm going to call a special episode today, and the reason it's special is because I've only got one guest, and it's that way by design, because I know when I get to talking to this guy, I'm just going to keep talking, and he's going to keep talking, and we're going to have a good conversation back and forth, and I think you're going to enjoy it. If you are a business executive in South Carolina, and most importantly, if you are an executive in the upstate of South Carolina, you know this guy, or at the very least, you have heard his name, and that is Toby Stansell. Toby is the CEO at Cargo, and he is here to talk about that and also a new book that he's written, and we're going to get all to it here in just a minute. Toby, my friend, welcome.
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me on the show. Very much, Rich.
I am so glad that you're here. I'm going to have fun with this. So, first of all, I've read your book.
Good.
And it's called The Winding Road to Excellence. And going to show it up there for the folks. It's got a great tagline: Leadership Lessons Learned from Life's Potholes.
Right.
And we're going to get into that book, but we're going to do that in a minute. You know, Toby, I told you when we were talking not too long ago that I feel that if you're a good salesperson,
right,
and you're a smart, intelligent salesperson, I think for the most part, you can sell anything in whatever industry that you want.
That's true. Most of those skills are transferable.
That's right. But also, in the chief executive officer types of roles, if you're a smart dude, if you're intelligent, if you understand business, if you understand how to manage people and processes, you can be successful in a variety of industries. And you have proven that you're that guy.
Thank you.
You have been in the apparel business. You have been in the IT world. You went to work for a CPA firm, even though you were in technology solutions there. And now you're the CEO of a marketing agency called Cargo. What the heck, man?
Right. Well, you know, that's interesting you say that, but I think it's really about substance over style. And, you know, Jim Collins would say charisma is actually a liability when it comes to leadership. And I had to learn that because I was in sales much of my career.
The charismatic curse.
The charismatic curse. It's true. And so for me, it's about, and there are all different kinds of leadership styles. You know, I teach this at Clemson, probably 10 kind of well-cataloged, you know, traditional or conventional styles of leadership. But I think historically, if you look at, and it's what I call in the South, you call it the plantation mentality. The autocratic leader walks out on the porch of the mansion every day, summons the minions out of the field, tells them what to do, and they go off and do his bidding. And in my career, I've just learned, especially in 2023, that style of leadership in my book is bankrupt. And so I think that's what's allowed me to transcend that kind of that head role, whether that was president or managing partner or CEO in various types of disciplines and industries, is an attitude of going in, and three words that I've always kind of subscribed to, and that is no sudden moves. Don't go in and just try to put, you know, my imprint, how a business works, my stamp. Right. We're going to do it my way. Right. Let's go in, let's take stock of what's working. Let's see what's not working so well. Let's see what really matters to the customers.
Right.
You know, and can I answer these three questions? What is of utmost importance to the market of the customer? What is it that the competition's not offering, they don't have, they can't deliver, or they won't, or they hadn't thought of? And what is it that the customer's not expecting? So when they hear the combination of those three things, it's very important to them, they've not heard it from somebody else, and they're not expecting it, then their response is, wow, we never thought of that. That's exactly what we need.
We're going to get into that. That was in your book, and if I remember right, and by me saying this, you're going to know I read your book. That was where you used the illustration of the crooked arrow.
That is correct.
And by having all those three things, you get a grasp on your customer, and it's not as easy to pull that arrow out without causing damage.
That's a great.
Right?
That's exactly right. Most people wouldn't describe that exactly as you did, because that's perfect.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear it. All right, we're going to get more into the book in a second, but let's just back up. You wrote The Winding Road to Excellence. Now, you also told me not too long ago that you are sort of winding down your career.
I am.
Now, that does not mean it's imminent, okay? So let's understand that. It's not imminent, but you are in that stage of winding down your career. And I find it interesting that the name of the book, The Winding Road to Excellence, there's probably a connection there in some way. You've gotten to the point in your life where you are looking in the rear view a little bit, and you're sharing a lot of the things that you learned.
Well, I think, most people write books, how-to books, how to be successful. A how-to book on how to be the greatest salesperson, the greatest accountant, or the greatest marketer, the greatest broadcaster. But the truth is, we live in such a dynamic world today. Things change so fast, technologically, competitively, culturally, socially, commercially, that when people say, I'm going to tell you how you do this, I'm going to tell you how this works. The problem is that works today.
Yeah.
2 years from now, it's going to be marginally effective.
Right.
And 5 years from now, it's not going to work at all.
Yeah.
And so I think people need to realize that the path to success means different things to different people. But significance in my book means you've made other people's lives better, personally, professionally, culturally, socially, spiritually. And so for me, people said, Toby, you've got such an imprint or a kind of a template for leading companies. Why don't you write about that process? And I said, I'm not going to do that. And here's why. I said, what works today may work not quite as well tomorrow, may not work at all a few years from now. But I will tell you kind of the indelible lessons that I learned along the way that hopefully will compress the maturation process for new leaders. So that's why it's called Leadership Lessons Learned from Life's Potholes. Just don't go step in the potholes or the gopher holes or run off the road like I did.
I hear you, but along with that, on the back of the book, it says Mantras for Excellence, Relatable Lessons for Modern Leaders, and I think that's what you're getting at. Before we get more into the book, though, and I want to talk about the first section and the last section, I had to choose, okay? And that's what I chose. We're going to get into that in a second, but first, let's talk about Cargo. You joined Cargo a couple years ago now, and I didn't see this coming, and you did not even see this coming. Cargo, big marketing agency, big brand,
Correct.
Big global brand, national brand stuff. How did Toby Stansell find his way into that business?
Well, when I was at Ubi occupied the entire top floor of the old cotton warehouse on Rent Street.
Now, that's an apparel firm.
That's an apparel firm. So we were the uniform provider became the uniform provider to Chick-fil-A and SkyWest Airlines and Food Line grocery stores, among a lot of other larger organizations. But Cargo was a kind of a fledgling ad agency that moved into one of the offices, suites, let's say, in the bottom of that building. And I met their four owners. And, we were in the apparel business. They were in the marketing business. I think they helped us with some of our marketing and maybe our first website. We provided them some apparel, just promotional apparel. There were logos on it, I think. But I got to know the owners and founders. And it's funny, even though I was moving from business, I went there to Acme, and then I went to Cherry Beckard. Just from time to time, two of their owners particularly would call me and say, hey, we've got an opportunity to go after a fairly large account. And my background had been selling to the biggest organizations in the world, Lockheed and Northrop Grumman and Boeing, big aerospace and defense companies, and then tier one automotive companies, Johnson Controls and Packard. So I knew how to take a fairly small business and make it attractive and a worthy partner, for really large global brands. And so they would just ask me, I gave them free consulting. Right. Every couple of years they would call me. And so in September of 2020, they called me and they just said, hey, we haven't seen you in a few years. Would you be our guest at dinner? And I said, sure. And they said, well, let's go to Halls. That made it even easier to say yes. So we went to Halls, and we hadn't been at dinner maybe 25 minutes, and Scott Brennan looked up from his plate, and he said, listen, we have a proposition for you. We need a real CEO at Cargo. We want you to come be our CEO. And my response was, listen, I'm flattered, and I'm honored, and I'm intrigued, but I'm really not interested. And I said, most of my life, sales, I've been in sales, and that's easy to measure. And I said, marketing for me has never been easy to measure. And so I'm just not sure that's a right fit for me. And so they cordially ended dinner, and I went on my way. But they wouldn't let up.
Yeah.
And they kept calling me, and it became clear that Cherry Beckert, you know, I don't mind saying how old I am, 67, but at 65, you withdraw from the partnership. So that would have been that December. So it became clear that Cherry Beckert was going to take a different direction related to his partners. And so they called me up one day, and I said, listen, if y'all are still interested, I said, I will talk to you about this. But it's not, I want you to know that I'm not the most experienced marketer on earth, but I do have a long history selling to the type of businesses that you sell to. Their industries were technology. I'd started with IBM many years ago. Transportation equipment. I'd been both in aerospace and defense and automotive. Financial services. I'd worked, and a lot of that I'd worked because I'd worked with private equity, and I'd had to finance a number of companies from the ground up, and so I knew how financial services worked. And then industrial, and most of my life had been spent in working with manufacturing companies or manufacturing software companies. So I just said, hey, you may have to teach me the ropes when it comes to being a marketing executive, but I think I'll be able to connect with your market.
Right.
And that was how the marriage began, and that's how it's played out. And that's really today, I think, what makes Cargo uniquely different than most ad agencies is that, you know, not only do we draw pretty pictures and do videos and have animations and create commercials and advertisements and marketing material and assets, we understand your business.
Yeah.
You know, we don't start with marketing strategy. We start with business strategy. What is it 3 years from now the market's going to be dying to have? What have your customers and your competition not seen yet that's just peeking its head over the horizon? How do we recognize the difference between a fad and a trend? A fad will take your wallet. A trend will make you some money. And let's help lead our clients in terms of what products and solutions and services do you need to be offering rather than us just already promoting what's in your catalog or on your shelves.
Right. You know, if I remember right, your first real job was IBM.
Yeah, I did have a couple of jobs before that,
right,
but that was the first real job.
Right, first corporate type of
That's
executive position.
That's true.
And in your book, you talked about, in the beginning, being scared to take that job. And the book, you also talked about, basically what happened was your wife, Susan, said, get over yourself.
She did.
And stop being fearful. And you took the job. And you talk a whole lot in your book about not letting fear get the best of you.
Correct. Well, I write something called Essential Elements for Success and Significance in Business and in Life. There are only 15 of those essential elements. They fit on 3 pages. But one of them came from Sir Richard Branson, who owns Virgin Galactic, Virgin Airways, Virgin Records. And he said, if somebody offers you a great opportunity and you don't know how to do it, don't say no just because you're afraid. Say yes and then figure it out along the way. Right. And that really was everything else in my life I'd said yes to, I was comfortable with doing it. I knew how to do it. Yeah. I knew the industry. I knew the skill set required. I knew the type of customer that I'd be selling to. But that was the first time. I'd really never touched a computer in my life. The only reason IBM was interested in me was because they needed somebody in Western North Carolina that knew manufacturing. They had 9 manufacturing accounts up there that did not have an assigned sales rep. And so I would have said no because I was afraid. And I told my wife that, and she said, you're not going to do that.
Right.
And I said yes. And that really was the inflection point in my career.
When you were young, you were you were sickly in the beginning.
Right.
Well, you said it in your book,
It's
basically.
true.
All right. So you had a heart
Condition.
And it fixed itself. All was good, right, for the most part, right? But it meant that in the beginning your growth was stunted for a while.
It's true.
And you write in your book that when you were 11 years old, you were only 70 pounds.
Correct.
I would assume, though, Toby, that you've had this personality your entire life, you know, with the personalities that we kind of have is what we were, right? That's what we were. So I'm assuming that you're 11-year-old, 70 pounds, little dude, but with a huge personality, and you probably had a chip on your shoulder because you were smaller than other folks. And I'm just wondering, did that kind of thing, has that contributed to your success?
It's no question. You know, if you read the very first kind of, people call them Tobyisms, which I'm not fond of. I call them mantras for excellence.
Yeah.
But the very first one I ever wrote, and it's really in the front of the book. It says, in my life, except when I've encountered people with severe physical or mental challenges, and there are plenty of people around us that have that, and some of us have it ourselves. The biggest difference between people who do and people who don't is that people who do simply believe they can.
Right.
It's not the IQ, number of degrees behind their name. It's not their family pedigree. It's not the street they live on. It's not the size of their bank account. There's just something in there that says, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to find a way to make this work. And I was always like that, but I don't think I woke up to that really. I mean, I was competitive, but I don't think I really realized that most of us are self-limiting, that we're doing just an infinitesimal amount of what we could be doing, probably until I got to IBM, and that was the wake-up moment for me.
What you're describing is confidence and security, and you get that from Mama and Daddy. I would assume you did.
I did, especially. That's my dad. Quiet confidence. He was an engineer, so he didn't talk a lot. But there was an old E.F. Hutton commercial. Used to say, "When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen." And when my dad would say something, it would just hit you right between the eyes. It was this pearl of wisdom. I still quote him. I quote him a lot in the book, but he told me something, I dismissed something based on its kind of surface value, and he said, "Toby, remember this, an option unconsidered was never really an option." And he told me just to dive in a little deeper. Don't just give things the Heisman because you weren't familiar with them or comfortable with them. But
that's good.
Yeah, it slows your pace of learning.
Yeah.
And my mom, my parents are still alive. They're 92 years old. My dad has dementia pretty badly. But my mom was just tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember this is not in the book, but I worked in the textile mill during the summers, but not during the winter, not during the Christmas break because the mill was shut down.
Yeah.
And I worked for a company called JMD Construction out of Greensboro, but we were pouring concrete inside a textile mill. Back then, you'd take a wheelbarrow, go to the front of the plant, the cement mixer would back up, fill it up, and I would literally spend 10 and a half hours a day hauling and pouring what was called a tenor frame, pouring the trench in these forms for a tenor frame. And I remember going home one day, I said, "I'm telling you, Mom, I just don't think I can do this work. It's the hardest work I've ever done in my life." She said, "That's funny. I don't see you bleeding out of any portal in your body. It must not be that bad. You're going to be back at work at 7 o'clock in the morning." And that's just the way she was. She would just not let you take the easy way out.
Right.
And that stuck with me. Just because something's challenging doesn't mean you give up or don't tackle it.
In the beginning, I'm going to jump around here a little bit because just as I was thinking about the things we would talk about, as I was reading, I just kind of highlighted things that struck me. And so there's no rhyme or reason to me jumping around a little bit now. You've always been a good salesperson. I mean, that's who you are. I don't need to witness you selling to know that you're a good salesperson. Personalities you can always tell, right? But at the beginning, you said in the book that your performance was extrinsically motivated, not intrinsically motivated. And I'm thinking that what you were talking about extrinsically was you were wanting that paycheck.
Yeah.
As opposed to wanting to make the sale because, by golly, I want to get that sale, right? Is that the difference?
Yeah, it's a lot of things. I think, first of all, one of those leading indicators, those behaviors that lead to success. And when all you're focused on is kind of the results of the lagging indicators, it's all about whether it's notoriety or the awards or the commission, incentive comp. But you kind of don't enjoy the journey. You don't value the value the process. I heard somebody say one time he was a gardener, and he said, I just couldn't wait till late spring, early summer when the flowers came up. He said, I was just miserable the rest of the time. He said, I love the flowers. I love their beauty, miserable doing the tilling and the weeding and all that. And then he said, I learned, I need to learn not just to enjoy the flowers. I need to enjoy the gardening.
Yeah.
And that lesson stuck with me. Johnny Lenning was the gentleman that shared that with me. And what I learned is that the rewards are a byproduct of doing the right things. And if you're doing the right things too, and you're building a team around you, it's creating a halo effect.
Yeah.
And you're helping develop people around you. And I've said for many years, my signature question is, what can I do to help you? And that just means you're completely altruistic or philanthropic. But at the end of the day, leaders have a great responsibility to achieve the desired results, to embody the culture. I have a list of them. But the last one is the most important one. And whatever that journey that we're on and whatever that work we're doing, just bring some people along with us, because our biggest responsibility as leaders is to generate new leaders.
Yeah. Well, you talk in the book about saying, don't be afraid to say, let's do it your way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the two most important 5-word phrases that I think any leader needs to learn, memorize, and live. The first one is, it's my fault, blame me. It's not because my mom spanked me too hard when I was 12 or somebody was holding a gun to my head and making that choice. Guess what? I made the choice with the information I had, the best data I had available, and it just didn't work out. And I'm not going to say, well, if Rick had done his part, we would have achieved the goal. I would have gotten this finished, but Mark didn't do what they were supposed to do on time. Somebody told me a long time ago, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, my wouldn't Christmas be all year long? And so just say, guess what? It's my fault, blame me. And the second 5-word phrase that's my favorite phrase is, let's do it your way. Let's say you are the smartest person in the room. You've always got the A or A+ idea. And your subordinates and your team leaders below you, they got good ideas too, but maybe they're not quite as good. They're A-, they're B+ ideas. But they will work. And as I like to say, they'll take 2 days longer and cost $2 more. But they're motivated and they believe in it. Guess what? Let's do it your way. You know why? Because in the end, their way will work better, because you've got not just me that's trying to make it happen, but they believe in it.
You got buy-in.
Got mine.
Humility, more important than visibility.
That's huge. Yeah, that's one of my favorite sayings, is that, this goes back to what you said about extrinsic motivation. So many times we do things and we want to be recognized for what we did or what we achieved. And that's the definition of a great performer. A great performer sets goals and achieves objectives. That's from a book called Fail-Safe Leadership by Dr. David Martin and Linda Muchler. But when it's all about how big I can make my, my treasure chest, my award chest, all the things that it kind of sucks all the sunshine into you. It's all about the attention that I can garner and the accolades that I earn. And so when that happens, when, we're all going to leave this world at some point. If it's all about me, when I go in the box, it all goes in the box with me. But if I say, guess what? There's plenty of sunshine to go around. Let's let other people stand in the brightest spots sometimes.
Right.
Even when they may not have been the key to success, they participated.
Yeah.
Let them be the ones who receive the accolades. Humility, not false humility. That's really kind of sickening, to tell you the truth. But just, hey, it's not important. And I say this all the time. My age and stage in life, it's not, for my legacy of leadership from this point forward, it's not anything else that I do, achieve, or accomplish. But it's what you become, do, achieve, or accomplish as a result of our relationship with each other. Then whatever legacy I have lives on long after I'm gone.
That's something like a parent and a child, right? That's true. You leave them behind. You mentioned
Got a legacy.
That's right. You mentioned earlier on, and we talked about the charismatic curse. And I find this really interesting because you were quite charismatic. And you referred to the charismatic curse as a form of costume leadership, which I really found is so descriptive. And then you described it or attributed it to things like political leaders today.
That's correct.
Right? I mean, what a great example of costume leadership, and I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Well, I think if you look at the factors we use to judge whether people are leaders today, is how good of a speech they can give,
yes, right.
Or how smooth they are on television or on camera,
right,
or how articulate they are under pressure. But the truth is, the definition of leader can be as charismatic, great personality, a peacemaker, but a leader has to set goals and achieve the desired results. So I can have all the look nice, dress well, speak well, have 1,000 friends, but I'm not a great leader if I can't mobilize and motivate my team to achieve the desired results for which we've been put together.
And you know what? And that's why it's not necessary that a great salesperson or a leader be an extrovert. right? The extroverted things come in the form of what you said, the costume leadership.
Right.
Those are extroverted types of personality traits. But it's the other stuff that's really important that you get into that doesn't require that extrovert personality, right?
You know, there's a book out there called Quiet Leadership by a gentleman named David Rock, and it is more than just leadership by example. We all ought to lead by example. But, you know, I think when I think of some of the leaders, and I won't call them by name in Greenville, that have had great accomplishments in the field of construction, real estate, finance, the ones that I genuinely admire, it's not because they're flashy or highly visible or they're out, and I do get to give a lot of speeches, but, you know, hey, I like to talk, I guess. I'm going to tell you the word that comes to mind, resolve. I had one of the most well-known real estate developers tell me one time, he said, you know, the jobs that I really like are the ones that everybody else turns down because they say that's just too difficult. Yeah. And he finds a way. And his reward in all that is when it's finished and you say, hey, nobody believed it could happen, but it did.
Yeah, right. And I want to go back, Toby, to something we talked about in the very beginning. You brought it up, and then I talked about it for a second. That is called the crooked wire value. And you wrote, you included a little description. I'm going to see if I can't find it as we're talking. But the crooked wire value, if I'm simplifying it, is that you come up with things that basically make you indispensable.
That's right. Good work.
To your company, to your client.
Right.
And then if you disappear, they can't pull that arrow that you described out without causing a lot of damage.
That's
right?
right.
Isn't that what we're talking about?
It is. And I must tell you how this came. I think that's one of the most important concepts that any business person ought to learn. I see you found the page.
Yep.
But, you know, I've been fortunate. I take a lot of young professionals out to lunch or out to dinner because they're really just trying to improve their craft, improve their game. They're respectfully asking for advice. And it's really interesting. Probably the most homogenous conversations I have are with young bankers because I'll say, well, you know, I know what bank they're with before I go out to dinner. And I say, well, you know, what do y'all offer that other banks don't offer in the retail banking or commercial banking space? And to a fault, they all say, oh, well, all bank services are almost the same. And I say, don't ever say that.
Yeah.
Even if it's true, don't say it. Don't allow yourself to be commoditized. You've completely eroded all of your competitive edge and all of your differentiated value. It's gone once you say that. I said, wrap it in some sort of package, value-added service. Do something, not just to make your solution suite different, but to make it better. Well, what happened was years ago, I was in New York. I don't even remember what company I was representing, but I ran into a very experienced CEO, and I didn't come up with this term. He came up with the term crooked wire value. I said, what does that mean? He said, so many times people see, you know, the only differentiation they can see between your product or your service or your solution is price. And so they're buying on price. And so it's like, you know, if having a straight air that shoots through the body of the business, well, that air's got 1/4 inch in diameter and it's not got a very big point. It'd probably be pretty easy to extract that air out of the business, man, not even hit any organs or bones or anything, and replace it with another air that looks just like it and fill all the holes, and you don't even bleed very badly. Right. And he said, you got to come up with features and functions and things that put crooks in that era, you know, that are things that met the criteria I said earlier, of utmost value to the market and the customer, unmatched by the competition. Now, that doesn't mean the competition doesn't have it, but it may be poorly promoted, poorly distributed, or it's so high priced it's not really accessible. Mm-hmm. And then unexpected by the customer, they never saw it coming. And when you do that, he said, you know you've hit a nerve when the customer says, wow, we never thought of that. That's exactly what we need. And that takes that straight air and puts a 90-degree bend in it. He said, if you do enough of that, you can be at the higher priced alternative. But the customer says, I'm not going to get rid of them because I'm not going to live without those services. They basically have become addicted to those things that you provided, and they can't live without you. And if they try to extract you out of the business, now that air is not a 1/4 inch, it's that wide, and it's gonna tear their guts out when you pull it out.
Right, exactly. Toby, you had said also about the same time you were talking about the crooked wire value in the book, you were talking about the fact that it's hard to sell on product quality anymore.
It is.
Because over the years, we've had so much competition that everyone has to have a good quality product, or you're not going to be in business anyway, right? So you can't sell on product quality. You have to sell on something else, which is what you're talking about. And one of the things to sell on, always, 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 is customer service, and especially because we have become desensitized to such poor customer service that when great customer service appear, it'll smack you in the face, and my goodness,
Really
right?
will. And it's absolutely exponentially true today. The hospitality and restaurant industry is a perfect example today. So many restaurants are having difficulty getting wait staff. Wait times are longer. I won't say what restaurant it was. I actually went to a fast food restaurant in the Charlotte area 2 weeks ago, paid for my food, had such a challenging time getting it, I just let them keep the money and left.
Yeah.
And so here's why product quality has become the price of entry. For years, manufacturers in the world were vertically integrated. They made everything from the raw materials to actually shipping the finished product to put on the store shelves. I always use textiles in the South for example. The same company owned the farm, they grew the cotton, they picked it, they combed it, they carded it, they baled it, they shipped it, they spun the yarn, they wove or knitted the fabric, they dyed and finished it, they stored it, they cut and sewed it into the final goods, and they shipped it to the store. Today, to make a piece of apparel, takes 19 different participants in that supply chain. And the reason is, in every aspect of production today, there's so much technology, so much science, so much engineering, so much math, so much information, so much marketing. You can't be an expert in everything it takes to produce that product. And so you've got suppliers. In the automotive industry, here's a great example because of BMW. But BMW, the primary components they actually manufacture on that car are the bodies and the engines. And they can't be the best in the world at tires because Michelin and Bridgestone and Goodyear are the best, and others too. Transmissions, ZF and Borg Warner are the best. Interiors, list. So they become a designer, tester, system integrator, manufacturer, marketing, sales, support organization. That's what they are, that they assemble the ultimate driving machine and deliver it, but it takes a lot of partners. So now all the manufacturers of the end user products are using a lot of those same supply chain members. So guess what? The quality of that end product is very similar, even when the price may not be. So people can find all along the price strata, the price scale, quality products that you can buy. So the key is, how do I differentiate what I'm selling from somebody else? It's all about customer experience. It's all about what creates customer loyalty. How do we make sure that we don't just react when the customer has a problem or respond when the customer has a problem? Why don't we anticipate all those challenges and let's head them off before they happen? Those businesses that can project, that can think ahead, how do we create an environment that even before anything goes wrong with that customer, we're making sure that it doesn't, or when it does, we beat them to the punch.
Right.
And that's who's going to win in the great game of business.
Put more kinks in that wire, right?
That's correct.
I told you I was going to jump around just a little bit, a couple more things, and we'll get you out of here. But you mentioned a banker earlier, which reminded me that you talked about Jimmy Fowler in your book. You mentioned Jimmy, and I've known Jimmy a long time, works banking executive, long time with County Bank. And you had said that Jimmy told you once to never make peace with a weakness.
That's right.
And what a great line that is.
Well, listen, Jimmy, it's so easy, especially when it comes to people in business. See somebody's a marginal performer. They're not terrible, they're performing, but they won't close the gap between current performance and their potential. And it's so easy to say, well, we're not losing money on that person, but you're not being honest with yourself about the opportunity cost. And there's so many things that we know that are not working in an optimal fashion. They're no longer relevant. They're no longer the best solution. But it's just easier to let it rock along. Yeah. It's not hurting you, but it's not helping you to the degree that it could. And so Jimmy he told me one day, he said, I forgot what we were talking about, but he and I helped lead the Minority Business Accelerator together in Greenville. He was always a guest lecturer. And he just said, Toby, don't ever make peace with a weakness. And I said, I can't head off and address every challenge, but I do need to prioritize those things that are not operating in an optimal fashion. They're not creating the kind of operational and financial performance or operational and financial contribution to our business that I'm expecting. and let's deal with it.
You know we need to get rid of our F performers and our D performers, and we love our A performers, and we'll be okay with our Bs. It's those C performers that we often just let it go and let it go and let it. It's average.
That's funny you said that.
It's average.
I learned this from David Pitts when I was at Acumen. He said, Toby, he said, if we're hiring somebody, let's either hire great. He said, if we've got the money and we can find somebody with a proven track record and they know how to do it, they've proven it over years, let's hire great. But if we can't afford it, or the budget doesn't support it, or it's just not there, let's hire green. Don't ever hire people in the middle. He said, because they tend to stay in the middle. And I thought that was a great point, because I learned to hire a lot of green people. And what Patrick Lencioni said, hire people that are hungry, humble, and smart. Yeah. I came up with my own acronym called IQ, to hire people with intelligence, integrity, and initiative. And guess what? They will push themselves to be great.
That's good stuff, Toby. I'm going to get you out here on the very last thing that you said in your book, and that is we need more good leaders, be one. And so right before we take off, any last words for young executives out there?
I do. I think when we think of leadership, we think about our position in the organization chart. You know, do we have people reporting to us? You know, there are people that we're responsible for managing or leading. Don't think of it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know who told me this, but it makes an organization chart may give you a position, but only people can give you a power. Regardless of where we are in life, our station in business, all of us have people that are around us that are within the sound of our voice and under our sphere of influence. Somebody's going to set the direction and pace for the people around you. It might as well be you.
Love it. Folks, that is Toby Stansell. He is the CEO at Cargo, and he is the author of The Winding Road to Excellence, Leadership Lessons Learned from Life's Potholes. It was so good talking to you, pal.
Thank you, Rick. Good to see you.
Good stuff, folks. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. We will see you the next time.